For the first time in what felt like forever, I finally whispered the words to myself. It's time to live for me now. It didn't come from a place of bitterness, but from a quiet, long-buried strength I had spent years living for. Others, giving, adjusting, sacrificing, always putting my needs at the bottom of the list. But now, something inside me had shifted. I was ready. I wasn't angry. I was just done. The following days moved like a whirlwind, full of purpose and action. Beatrice, ever efficient, scheduled several more viewings for the house. She worked quickly and professionally, and within days we had 3 solid offers from serious buyers. It wasn't easy to choose, but I ended up selecting the first couple who'd expressed interest. Their offer wasn't the highest in terms of money, but they didn't make any unreasonable demands, and more importantly, they were ready to move fast. That mattered to me more than a few extra dollars. Meanwhile, Elliot's messages didn't stop. My phone lit up constantly, at first with firm, almost bossy tones, then shifting to softer, pleading words, before returning again to sharp, guilt-laced comments. I didn't respond to any of them. I refused to engage. I knew that if I even opened that door, I'd be pulled back into a place I'd just crawled out of. I couldn't allow that. Then came the surprise. Tamsin, who had never once called me directly in all the years I'd known her, suddenly dialed my number. Just once, I saw the name on my screen and let it ring until it stopped. I wasn't ready to hear whatever excuse or guilt trip she might offer. I wasn't interested in justifications. About a week later, my phone rang again. This time it was Beatrice, her voice cheerful. Mrs. Winters, everything is in place. The buyers signed the agreement. The deposit has cleared, and the inspection passed without issues. We're all set to close tomorrow. It was perfect timing. Just 3 days before Elliot and his family were set to fly off to Europe. That gave me plenty of time to arrange for their things to be packed up and sent into storage, as planned. The next day, I went to Hugh's office to finalize everything. I was a little nervous, but mostly steady. The buyers, Dr. Phelps and his wife, greeted me warmly. They were kind, the kind you don't see every day. Gentle smiles, respectful eyes, soft-spoken words. They told me they'd been waiting for a home in Hillrest for years, and were thrilled when this one popped up unexpectedly. You have a beautiful home, Mrs. Winters, Dr. Phelps said sincerely. We'll take good care of it. I gave him a small, polite smile, saying nothing more. I didn't tell them the truth, that I'd never lived in that house, that I had bought it for my son and his family, believing it would be a gift of love, that I was never welcomed in it, treated instead like an afterthought, that my kindness was taken for granted and my presence barely tolerated. There was no need for them to know all that. Signing the documents didn't take long, maybe 45 minutes, and with the final signature it was official. The house was no longer mine, and more importantly, no longer theirs either. Elliot had lost his free ride. Hugh stood up and shook my hand firmly. Congratulations on a successful sale. The funds will be in your account within 24 hours, he said warmly. I thanked him, then turned to Beatrice. What about the belongings? When can we begin moving everything out? It's all set, she said confidently. The movers will arrive tomorrow morning. Everything will be packed and sent to the storage unit by evening. That's just what I wanted, I replied. I want it all done before the former tenants return. Beatrice nodded with understanding. Don't worry, Mrs. Winters. We'll handle it smoothly. As I stepped out of Hugh's office, I felt a strange lightness in my chest, like I'd just shrugged off a heavy load I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. The decision had been made, the action completed. There was nothing left to second-guess. Later that evening, I sat at my kitchen table, planning a trip I'd only dreamed of before. But this time, it wasn't a fantasy. It was real. I opened my laptop and selected a guided tour of Tuscany. The departure was a month away. Just enough time to prepare, but not enough time to lose my courage. I reserved my spot, paid the deposit, and then, without hesitation, booked a round-trip business class ticket. Why not? I thought. I could afford it. And it had been years since I had done anything like this for myself. The next day, as scheduled, the movers arrived at what used to be Elliot's home. I handed them the keys and left. I couldn't bear to watch. I didn't need to. Beatrice had promised she would personally oversee everything. That evening she called with an update. Everything's packed and moved into storage, she confirmed. The Phelps will receive the keys tomorrow, just as we agreed. Thank you, I said. And the notice? We had spent quite a bit of time, Hugh, Beatrice, and I discussing how best to inform Elliot of the sale. In the end, we decided to keep it simple and calm. We wrote a letter explaining the situation and included the address of the warehouse where their belongings had been stored. Beatrice had delivered it to the neighbors next door, just as I'd requested. They promised to hand it to your son when they return, she said. Perfect, I replied. Thank you again for everything. After I hung up, I sank into my chair and looked out the window at the setting sun. Tomorrow, Elliot and his family would be flying to Europe, never suspecting that their return home would be to nothing. No house, no furniture, just a letter. Was it harsh? Maybe. But after years of quiet cruelty, the kind you can't see, but can feel every day, I didn't see it as revenge. I saw it as freedom. I had spent too many years tied down by guilt, obligation, and emotional manipulation. For once, I felt strong, in control, and fully myself. And as I sat therein, the fading light, I felt it again. A deep breath of relief, like I could finally breathe again. Before I went to bed, I pulled out the photo of Randall from my knitstand. It was a habit. I looked into his eyes and whispered, "Would you be disappointed in me?" His smiling face didn't answer, but in my heart, I believed he'd understand. Randall always admired strength and dignity. He would have hated to see me used and disregarded. He would have supported this decision. In the morning, I woke up with a lightness in my step and a calm in my soul. The money from the house sale was safely in my account. A solid sum that gave me choices again. Options. Freedom. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the future. I was ready to explore it. I didn't regret my decision for a second, but rather excitement before the inevitable storm. I knew the reaction would be emotional. Elliot had never been good at handling surprises, especially unpleasant ones. And Tamsin, well, I couldn't imagine the hysteria she'd throw. The phone rang as I was finishing dinner. It was an unfamiliar number with an international area code. "Hello," I answered cautiously. "Mom." Elliot's voice sounded strange, strained. "Why aren't you answering my calls? I've been trying to call you for a week." I really ignored his calls and texts the whole time they were in Europe. I didn't want to spoil my mood. "I've been busy," I replied neutrally. "Busy?" There was a hint of irritation in his voice. "So busy that you couldn't take a call from your own son?" "Yes, Elliot," I said firmly. "So busy. I have my own life, you know." He was quiet for a moment, clearly not expecting that answer. Usually, I apologized, made excuses, tried to reassure him, but not now. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked in a different tone of voice. "You cancelled all the payments. You don't answer the phone. Are you all right?" There was a concern in his voice that I hadn't heard in a long time. But I knew it wasn't genuine. He wasn't worried about me, but about the money that had suddenly stopped flowing into his accounts. "I'm fine," I replied. "Better than I'd been in years." "And how are you? How's Europe?" "Fine," he replied absently, clearly surprised by my calmness. "Listen, we need to have a serious talk when we get back. We're flying in tomorrow, so maybe we can stop by your place tonight." "I think a conversation would really be necessary," I agreed. "But maybe not tomorrow. You'll have a lot of things to do when you get back." "What kind of things?" he asked in bewilderment. "The usual jet lag baggage claim." "See you, Elliot," I said, not answering his question. "Have a good trip." I hung up before he could ask any more questions. My heart was pounding, but I felt oddly calm. I had done what I had to do. Now I just had to wait for the consequences. I spent the next day at home waiting for the inevitable call. It rang around 6 p.m. exactly when estimated Elliot and his family should have gotten from the airport to their former home. "What you did?" His voice was low with barely contained rage. "Hello, Elliot," I replied calmly. "I assume you're back by now." "Mom," he almost growled. "What the hell is going on? Why are there some people living in our house? Where's all our stuff?" "Your things are safe in storage," I said. "The address is on the letter I left at the Niebuhr's house. And the new owners, Dr. Phelps and his wife, live in the house. A very nice couple." There was a deafening silence. I could almost see Elliot trying to make sense of what I'd heard. The expressions of disbelief, shock, and anger alternating on his face. "You sold our house," he finally squeezed out. "I sold my house," I corrected him. "The one that was deed-tome and paid for entirely with my money. But we lived there," he shouted. "It was our house. How could you?" "Very simply," I replied, remaining calm. "It went to a realtor, found buyers, signed the papers. Just a real estate transaction." You, he gasped with indignation. "You had no right." "Actually, I did," I argued. "Legally, I own the house. We never signed a deed of gift or deed of sale in your name. Remember, you insisted that it be in my name for convenience with the bank. It was temporary." His voice broke into a shout. "We were going to reissue it later. But we didn't," I said. "And now it's too late." A woman's voice came through the phone, shrill, hysterical. Tamsin was demanding the phone. A second later, she was screaming in my ear. "You old witch! How could you do this to your own son? To your own grandchildren. Where are we supposed to live now?" "Good evening, Tamsin," I said, not giving in to the provocation. "And sure with your income you can find a suitable place to live. Maybe not in Hillrest, but comfortable enough." "Our income?" Her voice rose another octave. "You know very well that we can't afford a house like this on our salaries." "That's why you agreed to help." "Exactly," I agreed calmly. "I agreed to help out of love for me son and my grandchildren. But when they called me a burden, I realized that my help was not appreciated. Well, now you're free of that burden." "It was just a figure of speech," screamed Tamsin. "That's not what we meant." "What did you mean, Tamsin?" I asked. "That I'm good enough to pay for your house, your cars, your children's school, your gardener, your au pair, but not good now to go on vacation with you. That you only need me as an ATM machine, but not as a family member. You've got it all wrong." There were tears in her voice. "We love you, do we?" I asked. "Then why haven't you asked me out to dinner in the last year? Why haven't you called just to check on me? Why have my grandchildren stopped coming to see me, except when you need a free babysitter?" She was silent, and there was more truth in that silence than in all her yelling. Look, Tamsin said at last in a different tone of voice. Let's talk this over. We can come over right now. No, I said firmly. I wasn't expecting to feel this calm. Not after everything that had happened. But as I looked out the window at the evening sky, a sense of peace settled over me. I had spent too many years putting everyone else first, their comfort, their expectations, their lifestyle, while I quietly disappeared into the background. But not this time. Not tonight. I turned from the window and faced them. Not today, I said firmly, my voice steady. You need to collect your things from storage, find a place to stay. There's a lot you need to sort out. And I'm leaving tomorrow. There was a long pause. Tamsin's eyes narrowed slightly. You're leaving? She asked, completely caught off guard. Where are you going? In Italy, I said simply. I'm going on a tour through Tuscany. I've always wanted to see Florence. The museums, the hills, the art. It's something I've dreamed about for years. Italy? She repeated, as if she hadn't heard me right. Seriously, what about us? She continued after a beat. What about you? I'll be just fine, I said, my tone calm but unshakable. You're both adults. You can handle this. Besides, I thought I was nothing but a burden. Remember? I heard Elliot pick up the phone again. His voice, when he spoke, had changed. There was a mix of desperation and something quieter, maybe regret. Mom, please, he said. Let's just meet. Talk this out. Face to face. I get it. I know you're hurt. But this is too much. We just got home, and now we find out we have nowhere to live. We have 2 kids, Mom. Pearl and Orion. Please think of them. Oh, I have, I said, my voice steady. I've been thinking about them for years, every time I paid for their school fees, their camp programs, their electronics, their clothes. But somewhere along the way, they stopped thinking about me. Tell me, Elliot, when was the last time Pearl called just to say hello? Or when Orion asked how I was doing? They're kids, Mom, he replied softly, almost scolding. You can't expect them to act like adults. No, I can't, I agreed. But I can expect their parents to raise them with kindness, to teach them how to care about others. But you and Tamsin didn't. You taught them that grammar was a walking ATM, that I was just someone to take from, not someone to care about. That's not fair, he said quickly. Isn't it? I asked, not unkindly. Then how do you explain Pearl laughing with her friends about how old I am and how I don't understand anything? Or Orion refusing to play chess with me, something he once loved, because he'd rather scroll on his phone. They sit silently when I visit, barely lifting their eyes. That's not childhood. That's what they've been taught. Elliot didn't answer. For once he was quiet. Softened my voice. Look, Elliot, this isn't about punishing you. I didn't do this to get even. I couldn't live that way anymore. I was tired of feeling used, of thinking I had to keep buying your love with money. I needed to find myself again, to get my self-respect back. By destroying our family? He asked, bitterness rising in his voice. By throwing us out like trash. I didn't throw anyone out, I said firmly. Your things are safe and packed. You have jobs. You have money. You have choices. You're not helpless. And if we can't manage? He asked. That same manipulative edge in his voice I'd come to know all too well. If we have to move into a motel with our kids, if they suffer, then what? Then maybe you'll finally understand what I felt all these years, I replied, my voice quiet. Feeling helpless. Feeling like I had no voice, no worth unless I was paying for something. But the difference is, you're still young. You're healthy, You have every opportunity to land on your feet. Me? I'm a 67-year-old widow who, until now, was treated like dead weight. Suddenly Tamsin's voice rang out from the background, loud and angry. I couldn't make out her words, but then I heard a baby crying. Orion, I guessed. The chaos on their end was clear. They were falling apart. I have to go, Elliot said finally, defeat creeping into his voice. But this conversation isn't over. Of course it is, I said, gently but firmly. We'll talk again. But not tonight. And not tomorrow. I need time. And so do you. I ended the call and sat in silence, staring out the window again. The sky had darkened, the last colors of dusk fading away. My heart ached, but it also felt lighter, as though I'd finally spoken words that had been trapped inside me for years. For the first time in a long time, I had stood up for myself. Not in anger, but in clarity. I didn't hate them. I still loved them. That would never change. But I couldn't let love keep me in chains. The phone rang again. It was Elliot. I let it ring. They needed time to process what had just happened. And so did I. An hour later, the doorbell rang. I got up, peeked through the peephole, and there they were. Elliot looked tired, his face worn and eyes red. Tamsin was crying, her makeup running. Pearl stood off to the side, arms crossed, trying to look indifferent. And little Orion clutched a stuffed animal, confused and clearly upset. I opened the door but didn't move aside to let them in. Mum, Elliot began quickly. You have to give us the house back. It's impossible, I replied calmly. The house is gone. Sold. The deal is closed. The money is already in my account. And the new owners, they've already moved in. No, Tamsin, I objected. Calmly. It was cruel to use me as an ATM machine for years and then call me a liability. It was cruel to indoctrinate my children. Thatha grandmother was just a boring old woman who was only good for giving money. It was cruel to deny me the right to my own life, my own desires, my own dignity. Tamsin turned away, covering her face with her hands. Elliot stood up and walked over to her, putting his arm around her shoulders. They looked solaced, so unprepared for this turn of events. Part of me wanted to comfort them, to tell them that everything would be okay, that I would help them. But the other part, the part that had finally found its voice, knew it would be a step backwards back to my old life where I was used and unappreciated. You'd better go, I said quietly. It's getting late and you need to find a place to sleep. Mum. Elliot turned to me, tears in his eyes. Please don't do this. Don't turn your back on us. We will fix this. We'll treat you better. We'll be more attentive. Just help us now. I looked at my son, a grown man who was crying like a child, because for the first time in his life, he was facing the real consequences of his actions. I loved him no matter what, but I couldn't be his ATM again. Elliot, I said softly, I'm not turning my back on you. I'm just not going to solve all your problems anymore. You're adults. You can handle it. And if you really want to fix our relationship, then do it for love, not money. Because family isn't about financial transactions. It's about caring. It's about respect. It's about consideration. Let's go, Tamsin said, straightening up abruptly. We're not welcome here. I'll call the hotel. She headed for the door, pulling Pearl with her. Elliot stood there, unmoving, still looking at me with a pleading look in his eyes. You're going to regret this, he said quietly. When you're all alone. Maybe, I answered. But it's better to be alone than with people who don't respect you. Orion gave one last hug, whispering, "I'll miss you, Grandma." Then they were gone. Tamsin in front, stone-faced, followed by Pearl, staring down at her phone. Then Elliot hunched over as if under the weight of a sudden responsibility. And last of all, Orion turning around and thread away to wave at me. I closed the door and leaned my back against it. My heart was pounding a lump in my throat. But along with the pain, I felt strangely relieved. I'd said everything I wanted to say. I'd finally stood up for myself. And even though it hurt, even though it shattered the illusion of family well-being, it was the truth. And the truth, even bitter, is better than the sweetest lie. I took a deep breath in and out, calming me. Heartbeat. Tomorrow is a new day. Tomorrow I'm flying to Italy toward a dream I've been putting off for far too long. The morning before I left for Italy was surprisingly clear and quiet. I woke up early before dawn and lay staring at the ceiling for a long time, remembering yesterday's confrontation with Elliot and his family. Their shock, disbelief, outrage. It was all expected, but it still left a heavy residue, especially Elliot's words about how I would regret it when I was alone. There was some truth to them that I couldn't deny. Loneliness frightened me, and it was the fear of loneliness that had Madame endure years of neglect. But now I realized that being alone and being lonely were different things. You can live surrounded by people and feel invisible, unwanted, as it was with me in recent years. And one can be physically alone, but feel the fullness of life, freedom, self-sufficiency. I got up, showered, and started packing the last of my things for the trip. My phone rang as I was zipping up my suitcase. Elliot, I knew he would call, trying to manipulate my feelings again to invoke pity. Not today. Today was my day, the beginning of my new life. I muted the sound and put the phone away. The cab was due at 8 in the morning. I still had half an hour to spare. I sat in the chair by the window, the same one Randall liked to read in the evenings, and opened the Toscany guidebook. I flipped through the pages, looking at the pictures of small towns perched on hills, the vineyards stretching over the horizon, the medieval streets I would soon be walking through. A warm sense of anticipation spilled inside. Suddenly the doorbell rang. ITENCD. Had Elliot really arrived this early? I went to the door and looked through the peephole. To my surprise, standing on the doorstep was Orion, my youngest grandson, alone without his parents or sister. I opened the door. "Orion, what are you doing here so early? Where are your parents?" "They're at the hotel," he answered, shifting from foot to foot. I got up early and took the bus here. I wanted to see you before I left." I was touched. Of the whole family, only the 10-year-old boy had the sincerity and courage to come to say goodbye. "Come in," I said, letting him in. "I don't have much time, but a cab will be here soon." Orion came in and looked around as if he were seeing my house for the first time, though he'd been here many times before. But perhaps he was looking through different eyes now. The eyes of a child who had suddenly realized that adults were not omnipotent or omniscient, that they could make mistakes, suffer, make difficult decisions. "Grandmother," he said, pulling a small package out of his pocket. "I wanted to give you this. It's for traveling." I unfolded the paper and saw a small keychain in the shape of a compass. "It's so you won't get lost," Orion said seriously. "So, you could always find your way home." I felt a lump come up in my throat. That simple, childish gift meant more to me than any expensive offering I'd ever received. There was a genuine concern in it, unmarred by calculation or obligation. "Thank you, honey," I said, hugging my grandson. "This is the best gift ever. I'll take it with me everywhere." The doorbell rang. A cab had arrived. Orion hugged me goodbye as tightly as he had when he was little. "I'll miss you, Grandma." Will you bring me something from Italy? I will, I promised, kissing him on the top of his head. Now I really had to go. I walked out to the cab with a light heart. Maybe all was not lost. Maybe there was a silver lining to this situation. A chance to build a new, healthier relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. At the airport, I turned my phone off. I didn't want calls from Elliot or texts from Tamsin to mar the start of my trip. These 2 weeks would be mine alone. A time of freedom, of discovery, of new experiences. The flight was uneventful. I looked out the window at the clouds below and thought about how strangely life had turned. A month ago, I was just a convenient ATM machine for my family, a person who was tolerated out of politeness and used when necessary. Now, I was flying to Italy toward a dream I had put off for far too long. When the plane landed in Florence, I felt a surge of energy. The airport greeted me with warmth and the hum of voices in different languages. I went through passport control, got my luggage, and went to the arrival hall, where I was to be met by a representative of the travel company. A young Italian man with a sign that read Mrs. Winters spotted me and waved hello. He escorted me to the van where the other tour participants, 8 people all about my age or a little younger, were already waiting. "Welcome," said the guide when everyone was gathered. "My name is Marco, and for the next 2 weeks I will be your guide through the wonders of Tuscany." He talked about the tour program, the places we would visit, what awaited us in the coming days. I listened with interest, enjoying the melodiousness of his English with an Italian accent. A cozy room with a view of the tiled roofs of the old city was waiting for me at the hotel in the historic center of Florence. I unpacked, showered, and decided to get some rest before the evening group meeting. The next few days flew by like a dream. We walked around Florence admiring the majestic Santa Maria degli Ori Cathedral with its famous dome, wandered through the Uffizi Gallery, looking at masterpieces by Botticelli and Leonardo da Vinci, sat in small cafes enjoying the world's best cappuccino. Then our tour continued to the small towns of Tuscany. Siena with its uniquescal-shaped square, San Germano with its medieval towers, Montepulciano, famous for its wines. We stayed in familiar and guest houses, dined in tiny trattorias with recipes handed down from generation to generation, tasted local wines, and enjoyed the leisurely pace and beauty of the Italian countryside. I could feel something changing in me every day. It was as if the weight of many years was gradually falling off my shoulders, freeing me for new sensations, new thoughts, new life. I no longer thought of myself as Randall's widow or Elliot's mother. I was just Edith, a woman traveling in Italy, enjoying good food, interesting conversations, and the beauty of the world around her. A warm, friendly relationship developed in our tour group. We ate breakfast together, discussing plans for the day, ate lunch together in small restaurants, and enjoyed evening walks through ancient streets together. I became especially close to Grace and Robert, a couple from Canada, as well as a lone traveler named Vivian, whose husband, like mine, had died a few years before. One evening, sitting on the terrace of our guest house in Montepulciano, glasses of local wine in hand, Vivian asked me, "Utif, what made you take this trip? You said you'd been dreaming about it for a long time. But why now?" I wondered. Should I tell these people whom I had known for only a week my complicated story? But then I decided I wanted to share it. I wanted to hear an outside opinion from people who were not involved in this situation. So, I told them everything about Randall's death, about the gradual deterioration of my relationship with Elliot and his family, about the house I'd bought for them, about that unfortunate text message about my decision to sell the house and start living on my own. When I finished, there was silence. I was afraid to see the judgment on their faces because I hadn't done what was expected of a good mother and a loving grandmother. But instead of judgment, I saw understanding. You know, Grace said, I think you did the right thing. Hard, painful, but the right thing. No one deserves to be treated like that, especially by their own children. I agree, Robert nodded. I have. A friend who supported his son financially for years, paying his debts, giving him money for a business that never turned a profit. Eventually, the son just got used to it. Thought his father's money was his by right. It's not a healthy relationship. I think you've taught them an important lesson, Vivian added. Painful perhaps, but necessary. They must learn to live on their own, to appreciate what they have, and to respect others, especially their own mother. Their words were like a bomb to my soul. For the first time since making the decision, I felt completely confident that it was the right thing to do. I wasn't an abusive mother who had thrown her son out on the street. I was a woman who had finally decided to respect herself and demand respect from others. Thank you, I said, tears of gratitude welling up in my eyes. You'll have no idea how important your understanding is to me. The journey continued, and with each passing day, I felt more and more renewed, as if reborn. I enjoyed every moment. Morning coffee on the terrace overlooking the vineyards, walks along the ancient streets, evening conversations with new friends. I took dozens of photos, bought small souvenirs for myself and Orion, tried new dishes I had never known existed before. When it was time to return home, I felt mixed emotions. On the one hand, I didn't want this journey to end. On the other hand, I was ready to go back and start a new chapter of my life, with a different attitude towards myself and the world. At the Florence airport, before boarding the plane, I turned on my phone. Dozens of missed calls and messages from Elliot and Tamsin again. But now among them were a few from Pearl, my oldest granddaughter, who had never written to me before. I opened the first one. Grandma, when are you coming back? We live in a terrible apartment. Mommy cries all the time. Daddy said, you have to help us. The second was more blunt. It's not fair. All my friends live in normal houses and we live in this hole. I can't invite anyone to visit. Why did you do this, Tos? And finally, the third sent yesterday. I'm sorry. About the previous misses. The text message lit up my screen as I sat quietly by the window, sipping tea in a hotel lounge just before my flight back. Dad told me why you sold the house. I didn't realize we treated you so badly. I miss you. That was it. Short, but unexpectedly heartfelt. I stared at it for a long time, letting the words sink in. I hadn't expected anything, certainly not remorse. For a brief moment, my heart softened. Maybe, just maybe, there was still hope. Maybe this was a small crack in the wall that had built up between us. A chance to rebuild something. Slowly, carefully, on better ground up as the plane descended. Toward Purcellville, a quiet sense of peace settled over me. I was returning to the same little town, the same streets and corners I knew by heart. But this time, it felt different because I was different. No longer the woman they once controlled. No longer eager to please just to be loved. I had gone away burdened, but now I returned lighter, more sure of myself. I caught a cab from the airport and leaned against the window as we passed familiar roads. When we drove past Hillrist, the neighborhood where Elliot and his family had once lived in comfort, I didn't feel a trace of sadness or longing. Instead, there was something quiet and strong inside me, a kind of confidence I hadn't felt. In years, I didn't owe anyone anything anymore. Back at my house, everything was still as I had left it. The same soft curtains swayed gently with the breeze. The scent of lavender I'd packed into my drawers lingered faintly in the air. I unpacked my things slowly, took a warm shower, and changed into comfortable clothes. My body was tired from the flight, but my mind was steady. I reached for the phone and made the call I'd been avoiding. Elliot answered almost immediately, like he'd been holding the phone the whole day, waiting. "Mum, are you home?" he asked, his voice a mix of eagerness and hesitation. "Yes, Elliot," I said, my voice calm. "I'm back." There was a pause, and then he asked, "Can we come over? We need to talk." "Not today," I replied. "I'm tired from the travel. Let's talk tomorrow. 2:00. He agreed faster than I expected. So quickly. I knew he feared I might change my mind. After hanging up, I walked over to the window and looked out at the street, watching the trees sway in the summer breeze. Tomorrow wouldn't just be another visit. It would mark something new, a turning point. A life where I finally lived for me. Where I wouldn't keep giving parts of myself away until there was nothing left. A life where I'd speak up, set boundaries, and do the things I had once only dreamed of. I slept deeply that night and woke up feeling lighter. I made myself a hearty breakfast, cleaned the house, and even baked cookies, Orion's favorite, not Elliot's. Then I sat down at the kitchen table with a pen and notebook and wrote something just for myself. A list. A clear, no-nonsense list of the things I would and wouldn't do from this day forward in my relationship with my son and his family. Would not pay for their rent or buy them houses. I would not hand over money for things they simply wanted. I would not tolerate being dismissed or used. But I would open my door to my grandchildren. I would enjoy time with Elliot if he treated me with the respect I deserve. And I would offer help in real emergencies, health problems, accidents, things that truly called for support. At exactly 2 p.m. the doorbell rang. I opened it to see them all standing there. Elliot, Tamsin, Pearl, and Orion. They looked different than before, worn. Tired, clothes simple and plain. Not a hint of luxury on them. Orion ran into my arms like no time had passed. "Grandma, I missed you so much. Did you bring me anything from Italy?" I laughed gently, hugging him tight. "Of course I did, sweetheart. Come on in." They filed into the living room. Tamsin looked cold, stiff, like she didn't want to be there. Pearl wouldn't meet my eyes. Elliot tried to smile, but it didn't quite reach his face. "How was your trip, Mom?" he asked once they'd all sat down. "You look rested." "It was wonderful," I said truthfully. "Beautiful, actually. And thinking of going. Back in the fall. Rome. Maybe Venice." That was when Elliot dropped the politeness. "Mum, we need help," he said plainly. "We're renting now. Just getting by." "I know you're living like most people do," I replied calmly. "Within their means." "That's not what we're used to," Tamsin cut in sharply. "The kids are used to more." "People can change their habits," I said. "Especially the bad ones." Elliot softened his tone. "We know we had. You. I shouldn't have said the things I said. I called you a burden. I'm sorry." I looked at him for a moment. Was it guilt or just another strategy? After a pause, I said, "I forgive you, Elliot. But that doesn't mean we go back to the way things were. Things have changed. I've changed." "What do you mean?" he asked. "I mean, I'm not your ATM anymore," I said. "I'm not going to buy you houses or fund your lifestyle. You're adults. You can take care of yourselves." "But," he started. "I'd still love to see the kids," I said, before he could finish. "And I'd be glad to stay in touch as long as our relationship is based on respect, not money. And yes, if there's a real emergency, I'll help." Elliot and Tamsin exchanged glances. I could almost hear their minds wiring, searching for a new tactic. "We just want to be a family again," Elliot said. "No, Elliot," I said quietly. "It won't be like it was before. You didn't treat me like family. You treated me like a wallet. That part of my life is over." Tamsin stood, clearly irritated. Let's go, Elliot. She's not going to help us. Just then, Pearl finally spoke. Grandmother, she said softly, eyes finally meeting mine. I didn't know we made you feel so unwanted. I'm sorry. I was touched. Her eyes held sincerity. I forgive you, Pearl, I said. And if you want to visit me sometime, I'd love that. We used to have such lovely times together. She nodded, and for a second, I saw that sweet child I'd once known. I want to stay with Grandma, Orion said suddenly, clutching my hand. Can I stay? Elliot and Tamsin looked surprised, unhappy even. Not tonight, love, I said, stroking his hair. But you can come over any time. We'll bake cookies, play chess, read books, anything you want. We should go, Tamsin said stiffly. Kids, let's go. Elliot didn't move right away. He looked at me, eyes stormy with emotion I couldn't quite read. Mom, he said softly, you're really not going to help us? Not even a little? I already told you, I said clearly. I'll help if there's real need, but not to finance the life you used to have. He stood up slowly, and for a moment I saw the old Elliot, the one who always expected things to go his way. You'll regret this, he muttered, when you're old and sick and alone. Maybe, I replied quietly, but I'd rather be alone than with people who only see me as a purse. They walked out, Tamsin leading, Pearl next, Elliot behind her, and last was Orion. He turned around at the door, gave me a little wave, and I smiled back. I closed the door gently behind them and returned to the living room. My heart thudded in my chest, but I felt calmer than I had in a long time. I had done the right thing. I had stood up for myself. I had drawn the line. For once, I hadn't allowed myself to be used. I went to the window and watched them get into Elliot's old car, so unlike the SUV he once drove. Maybe they truly were struggling now. Maybe they were learning what it meant to live without a safety net made of my sacrifices. That their life was theirs to live, and mine was finally mine again.